Brother Merideth, ladies and gentlemen. The list of these benevolent organizations among us is the Tennessee Orphan Home. It began in 1909. I just wonder if the church cared for the needy back before that time. Now, if the church did, then such benevolent organizations as these are not necessary. And certainly churches could do their work without such organizations. And why would Brother Merideth insist upon some organizations that we could get along without and please God when they cause so much strife and division and they are so expensive among the people of God? I asked Brother Merideth, what would organizations of this proposition have to do to be benevolent society between the church and the work of caring for the needy? And he says benevolent societies equal the home. He evaded. He didn't tell us. Obviously does not think there's any way to have such a wrong organization. If he does, he won't tell us. But the chartering corporations of these various organizations, we've read them in this discussion already, say that the corporation provides a home. The corporation is not the home, it provides a home. T.C., please. On this chart, we notice about Childhaven and its setup. We have a corporation that is called Childhaven. I want to raise the question, is Childhaven a benevolent society, and is it between the churches and the homes that it operates or gives to or put children in? According to Brother Merideth, it equals the home. It's not a separate organization from the home. It equals the home. Now, we have here a benevolent institution established in 1949, a board of directors only, Brother Merideth. The charter says it consists of board of directors only. That's all that makes up that corporation, board of directors only. It doesn't involve the orphan home, Brother Merideth. Did you know it said that, Brother Merideth? The corporation says board of directors only. He says that equals this. He means these men equals a place, facilities, necessary, and personnel and children. No, they don't, Brother Merideth. You know better than that. But notice how this corporation, this board of directors, owns and operates an orphan home at Coven, Alabama. In 1949, they formed this organization and incorporated it. They formed it first and then later incorporated it. And then they bought a home from the Oddfellows, the IOOF. And then later they put some children in it. Before they got it, the orphanage there at Childhaven, the property they bought had children in it under the Oddfellows' direction. See, this orphan home just changed who oversaw it. Brother Merideth, can't you see that? So the organization can't equal the home, because here's an organization called the Oddfellows like this that stood out here that was providing the home, and then Childhaven bought it from the Oddfellows and they put children in and started operating it. Can't you see that, Brother Merideth? I believe nobody else can. And then this board of directors also, benevolent institution, places children in adoptive homes. Does this society, this benevolent society, equal the adoptive homes? According to him, then, if the society is equals the orphan home, then it also equals the adoptive homes they put children in. He doesn't believe that. Does it equal the foster homes? Now, they place children in 9 counties. There's 19 foster homes in 9 counties in 1986 with 24 children in there. Is that board of directors equal to those 19 foster homes? Here's an organization that puts children in various homes, but he says, oh, there's no organization between the church and the home. Now, Brother Merideth, you know better than that, don't you? And then notice this. Now, this really caps the stack here. We have here this same organization that provides this orphan home over at Coven and puts children in adoptive homes, and 19 foster homes they put children in, at least 20 homes or more. This one organization has something to do with, and then they send children to visit what they call visiting homes. Some said children needed to visit in families. Isn't that strange? They mean these up here in this institutional orphanage needs to visit some private families. And so they wanted to send children away from them and put them out here in some homes so they could visit families. Brother Merideth. And then, of course, churches send that thing. Individuals send to it. And they also receive money from Social Security, gifts and estates, food programs, dividends and securities, interest on CDs, gain on sale of securities in 1 year was over $103,000. Brother Merideth. And then I said, does Hebrews 13:2 apply to individuals? This is question number 4, the local church or both? T30, please. And he said both. Well, that passage says to entertain strangers. And he says that applies to the individual, that applies to the church. Now let's notice what he's got then. We have here an organization that's a benevolent organization. And this benevolent organization consists of board of directors, and I've named it Loving Lodge for Strangers. And he says that individuals are to entertain strangers, that is, lodge them, receive them as guests, and churches too. And so here's individuals, though, that can give to the churches. They put into the church treasury, see, so they can entertain, like they can put in church treasury and visit, according to his argument. So they put in the church treasury, and so they can entertain, and so the church then sends this money over to this Loving Lodge for Strangers, and it builds motels, hotels, lodges, condos to take care of strangers. Would the above be scriptural, Brother Merideth? Tell us. Tell us what would be wrong with this. I challenge you to tell us what would be wrong with it. He says individuals can contribute to whatever the church can, and church can whatever the individuals can. Tell us about that, Brother Merideth. I challenge you to do so. Get T63 ready, please. You know, Brother Merideth had quite a bit to say the other night about there being just thousands of orphans, you know, as if they're just running around loose everywhere and you can't find a place for them. But let me tell you something. In 1965, Tennessee Orphan Home had 185 children. In 74, 9 years later, they had 105. They dropped 80. In 1982, they had 33. This big institution took care of 33 children, and at that time, they had 16 directors. Take care of 33 children. They wouldn't have but 2 apiece. And then hired, not even telling how many house parents and social workers and janitors, all of that, take care of 16. And Brother Merideth has taken care of 5. I mean, his wife has. Just like my wife did, Brother Merideth. We have 5, and she's done taking care of most of them. But those 16 directors couldn't take care of 33. And most of those men are rich men. And so they had to have $500,000 a year to keep that thing a-going. 33 children, and that same year they had an endowment fund of $1 million that produced annually $100,000 in interest and so on. And yet they were begging as if they were destitute. 16 directors couldn't take care of 33 children. That was kind of a decreasing every year instead of an increasing, wasn't it, brother? What happened to all those children? That Tennessee Orphan wasn't getting, was it? And I think by 1987 they had 70. And it cost them over $16,000 per child. And said, well, I'll go take care of those. But I want us to notice also that T63 charges entitled North Alabama Christian Children's Home. Now there's an orphanage like he's talking about, like he's defending, that brethren operate, that's called North Alabama Christian Children's Home, Route 1, Florence, Alabama. It began in 1970. That's about 19 years ago, isn't it? Began operation in 73, and they have 16 directors on their board of directors. In 1994, they had 16 directors. They had 1 administrator that lived in the same community with the kids. The same community. Well, I'm not saying in the same house. The same community. Well, he lived in the same community with those that he's overseeing. Of course, the board, those 16 directors might not have necessarily. Then they had 2 house parents, 2 assistant house parents, 2 relief house parents, 1 social worker, 1 consulting dietitian, 1 consulting psychologist. They were financed by churches, individuals, states, groups, including Stepping Stones for Children. That's an organization of women that you had to pay about $12, $15 a year to join, and they was going to raise money for this organization, this human organization, North Alabama Christian Children's Home, and so it took 23 workers, and they only had 6 children. They can't find them. And you talk about a farce. You talk about running around, children going everywhere by the thousands. I'd be ashamed, Brother Merideth, Here's brethren that's been operating since 1973. They couldn't find but 6 children, and there's 23 folks trying to take care of them and begging churches, getting money from individuals and states and groups, including stepping stones for children.
10 minutes.
6 children. And you're taking care of, your wife is taking care of 5. My wife did the same thing. Can you imagine this being palmed off on the brotherhood? What about some common sense, Brother Merideth? What about a little common sense? To say nothing of the Scriptures. If it were right in principle, I'd oppose all this junk. And then a few years ago out in Texas, at Palestine, Texas, there's an orphanage that was opened up by some folks that weren't Christians. It was called Cartmel Orphanage and Home for the Aged. And they made provisions. They were self-supporting, didn't have to beg anybody. Somebody willed all the property and money and so on. And they designed to take care of 12 children, and they waited and waited, and they couldn't find any orphans. After a year, they closed it down. I have the information in my briefcase. Children running around by the thousands. You know, last evening in his last speech, and he's done the same thing several evenings as far as making emotional appeals, and he's done the same thing this evening in his last speech. Brother Meredith made an emotional appeal. And instead of appealing to the Scriptures, when he said last evening, quote, "Now on this matter of the poor saints' orphans, I think it's always been chilling to me to hear a man talk about benevolence only to those who were poor saints. Imagine, if you will, an orphan child who needs help. He couldn't get it in this home. He couldn't get it in Brother Sutton's home. He couldn't get it there because he's not a poor saint. And he talks about the board of directors as though they were some kind of cruel things. But certainly, friends, they meet the legal requirements. It's simply a home that's been destroyed, that's been reconstituted. It's a new home. It's a restored home. It's not going to be as good as the mama and the papa. We all know that. It's not going to be that good. It's going to be the closest thing they're going to get to the mama and papa. It's going to be the closest thing they can get to a home. I've talked to people who were reared in orphan homes. He mentioned that again tonight, incidentally. And he says, I've talked to people who had no place to go, but they were taken in an orphan home, and they provided care for them. I'd like for you to explain to these people who receive their food and shelter and clothing and medical care that an orphan home is sinful, an orphan home is wrong. You wouldn't think they were so cruel either. End of quote. Simply an emotional appeal. But Brother Merideth, there are things which affect our emotions also. Let me show you some things we've had to live with and deal with in Alabama, where Childhaven is located. Before I present some of the things we have been faced with through the years, let me say this. I do not believe that Brother Merideth or any of you brethren here or any sincere Christian anywhere will endorse the things that I'm going to read about. So don't take it personal. I don't think any of you folks would do that. I believe you're better men than this. You're better women than this. The things that I'm about to read affect our emotions as well as those things that you call to our attention. We notice, Transparency T57, in April of 1972, we were faced in Alabama with the following headlines in some of our papers. Now here are some of the articles. In the Common Times, April 5th, 72, the headlines read, "At Childhaven, probe begins into beating of young boy." It mentioned the fact that the division licensed institutions such as Childhaven, and it shows how that a child was taken that was treated for bruises after the court order. He'd been beaten there at Childhaven. They refused to give him medical attention, and so after it was called to their attention, one of the teachers in one of the local schools called the superintendent and told him about the child being beaten, and his buttocks was beaten. They were bruised and bleeding, and so they came and got the child. The superintendent did, and he was told to take the child for medical attention. He took him back to Childhaven's home. The next day the boy came back to school. He was still like that. He hadn't gone to the doctor. They hadn't taken him to the doctor. And so the principal of the school where he went called the Department of Pensions and Security And they came out, some social work she did, and went and got a court order. And so it shows how that this Judge Robert South issued a court order for medical care Monday. The judge took the action after Childhaven officials refused to take the boy to a doctor. Now that's what we had to face. And notice here, Childhaven is supported by Church of Christ churches through the state. And then we notice here another headline said, Childhaven house parent, warrant issued for man accused of beating boy.
Amen.
And then we notice also, Transparency T58, that it says, accused boy beater fired. This is April the 7th of 72. Disciplinary measure slated for Childhaven. And so we have this same thing. And each time I had to mention that Childhaven is supported by Church of Christ churches in the state. Now the house parent was charged and found guilty in a court of law. Now about the time most people had gotten about these things happening, about 12 years later in 1984, we were faced with the following in some of the papers. Now on April the 5th, one of the headlines in the Times Daily said, quote, child abuse probe ordered. And then we notice here on the 20th to 4th of 84 that it says police arrest 2 men. And then it tells about 2 of the 3 people indicted as a result of an investigation into charges of physical and sexual abuse of residents of a Church of Christ Children's Home were arrested Thursday. And notice here that one was charged with second-degree sodomy. Here's another charged with child abuse. Both men lived in common. And both men were cottage parents. Now here's the real parents. Here's one that they either take care of the kids or abuse them. And those board members that are standing loco parentis that have the responsibility of hiring the folks, they didn't know this was going on. They would not approve of it had they known it, Brother Merideth. But what I'm saying is, no, they're not looking after the kids. They're a human institution. They're no part of that home as such. They just hire folks to run a home. Then notice how that it talks about a grand jury there in Cumberland County following its investigation of alleged child abuse at Childhaven. They issued a 2-page report, calls for the dismissal of most of the staff of Childhaven and revocation of its license if measures suggested by the jury was not followed within 90 days. Let's notice the next one, please. We have here T60. And the headline on 423 of 84 said, chairman of the home shocked, a board shocked the chairman of the church, board chairman of the Church of Christ Home for neglected children, said Sunday he was utterly shocked by the revelation of problems, including the alleged sexual abuse of young residents there. Talks about Childhaven's home, talks about firing 6 of the staff workers. And then notice how that it says that they continued during the weekend with the board agreeing to dismiss the rest of the staff in compliance with grand jury recommendations. These men that are in the church, some of them elders, some of them preachers and so on, did not see what was going on. They didn't know what the kids, how they was being treated. They had some hired hands over there working, didn't know what was going on, and so the state had to step in and say, fire all of them, and they fired them all. Now, Brother Merideth, we've got some emotions too, and we had to live with things like this. The next one, please. Then we notice Transparency 61, Childhaven trial begins. We notice here how that it tells the same thing, and then talks about sodomy and the involvement of a teenager. And then then in 96, Transparency 96, we notice further 5 indicted in Childhaven, a probe and so on. And then we notice just time after time, all these things are occurring. And then Brother Merideth thinks it's an emotional thing. We had to face these things. I went in the radio station one day, and a Baptist announcer said, he just got through announcing some of this junk, and he said, do you go along with that Church of Christ home over there in Cumberland? I said, no, sir. He said, I didn't think you would. I thought you was a better man than that. But what I'm trying to say, that's liberalism and all of this glory too. And it's not, that's the result of some of it. It's not that you'd go along with it personally. It's not that any of these men won't do that. But I'm saying we faced with it time and time again. And here's an article that's entitled, this is T95, entitled, After Months of Fright, Children's Cries Heard. And this would certainly affect the emotions of any person, because in this story here, it tells about how the children were personally abused. It shows how they were physically abused, how they were sexually abused, how they were mentally abused, and all of this right here was borne out by the fact that in the final outcome that these people were convicted. Someone went to prison. The board had to fire everything from the top down. Yeah, we had to face some things like that. No, these folks don't know what's going on. They're institutions between the church and the home. They're big businesses. That's what they are. They hire some folks. So, Brother Merideth, I told you the other night, let's talk about the Scriptures. And you wouldn't. You wanted to talk about some emotional things, didn't you? I didn't want to bring all this in. But I felt like I needed to, in view of the fact that you was trying to appeal to the emotions of folks like you did. Why don't you just discuss what the Scriptures say, and I'll be right after you. Thank you very kindly.